Today we're going to learn how to make a half square triangle. That's a square that's made up of two triangles of two different fabrics. In addition to your fabric, you'll need your rotary cutter, you'll need one of your rotary rulers, and you'll also need a pencil. We'll begin with two identical sized squares. I'm using 7-inch squares because I'm going to end up with 6.5-inch half square triangles when this is complete. So whatever size square you'll need, say a 5-inch square, then each of yours would need to be 5.5 inches. Be sure and add that ½ inch. So to begin, I'll just layer one right on top of the other. Once my two fabrics are layered right sides together, I'm going to take my ruler and line it up right down the center. So at the top, you want to line it up right here with that point, and same at the bottom. You want to line it up so that it goes from point to point. Once you've done that, you'll take your pencil and you'll draw your line all the way down. You can see here, I have my line all the way down. Be sure it's from point to point all the way down and that it's obvious for you to see. This will not show through when you're done with your square, so it can be as dark as you need it to be. Once our pencil line is drawn, we're simply going to sew a 1/4-inch seam on either side of that pencil line. So you can see here I have my needle lined up so that the edge of my presser foot hits that 1/4-inch line, and I'm just going to sew all the way down to the very bottom. Once you've completed your first side, you'll just want to go back down the other side. So you can see here, here's my thread from last time. Again, my needle is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of my presser foot, and I'm just going to sew again down the other side. Now my one square has 2 lines of stitching you can see on either side of that pencil line. So the next step is to take your ruler and line it up again with that pencil line like you did before. Be sure it's point to point, and then you're just going to want to use your rotary cutter and cut down that center line. So you can see now I have 2 separate pieces, each with that 1/4-inch seam allowance. Go ahead and press those to one side. Be sure you do the same side. It doesn't matter which fabric, but be sure you press toward the same side. Now you should have 2 squares that look like this. So the next step is going to be to trim it. If you measure your square, so we'll use this line here, it's likely going to be slightly more than 6.5 inches, meaning you'll need to trim just a touch off. You can see here there's a little corner piece that'll need to be trimmed off, and the edges sometimes are a little wider at one end. So what you'll want to do is, using your cutting mat, you can see there are all these angled lines of different sizes. We're going to use the 45-degree angle line here, okay? So you'll grab your piece and line it up. So first you'll want to choose a thick line to line it up with, and second, you'll want to line it up with a 45-degree line here. So you can see the very edge of my point lines up with that, and then I'm going to run down here. I'm going to angle it so again, this measures up. Now what you can do is you can scoot it slightly up that point. So it's going to pass, you can see here, it's going to pass this line and this line here. But you just want to be sure, the most important thing here is that your line continues on and lines up with this. And same down here. You can see here my line lines up. So next, I'm simply going to trim off that excess. So I'm going to start over here. Now, again, there's a 45-degree line on my ruler, so I'm going to use that as well to line up to be sure my line is accurate. And then I'm also going to slide it. So the way you use this one is you slide it along until it measures a ½ inch past, because we want a 6.5-inch square. So this, I know this is a lot and is a little confusing. You may want to watch this a couple of times and give yourself a lot of practice. So step 1, lay it out and find that angled line as well as anchor lines. So a line vertical and a line horizontal. Once you have your points lined up, you can slide it slightly until it appears to be generally in the center of your cut. Your next step is to take your ruler and again line it up with the 45-degree line, and then line it up over here. Because we are using a 6.5 inch, I'm measuring ½ inch across. So I've trimmed along the line. You can see here we have a ½ inch, and then over here, so we have a half, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so again, I'm going to lay my, being sure not to move anything, I'm just going to come over here. This time, I'm not going to measure my angles. I'm just going to cut straight across that line. So you can see here, I just cut this off. So now I have a straight line on this side, and I have a straight line on this side. My square is 6.5 inches across from here to here. Like I said before, I know this can be tricky, so practice a few times. So then our next task is to trim it the opposite direction. I, for this, personally like to actually twist my mat because I find I don't really want to move my square. Once I've twisted my mat, this time I'm not even going to use my angles anymore. I'm simply going to use my top line here. Do you see how it's a little over? So I'll trim there. Once you've trimmed your half square triangles, you can add them to your quilt blocks. For your bottom left-hand square, we'll have it turned this way, and then you'll simply be adding yellow. So it's going to look like this. So all you'll do here is you'll sew these two together, and you'll sew these two together, and then you'll sew the pieces together. For your top right-hand square, incidentally, it's the same fabric. You'll be using them like this. So you can see here, they're pulling together. So what it'll end up creating, you can see I haven't trimmed this one yet, is a diamond. Isn't that fun? So you'll just sew them together this way. As a quick note on your diamond square, to make sewing easier, I would recommend pressing 2 of your squares toward the dark fabric and 2 toward the light fabric. So you can see here, this square is pressed toward my lighter fabric. This one is pressed toward my darker fabric. So what that ends up meaning is that we can lock those seams like we've talked about so often. So then what you'll do is you'll slide your corners together until you have your points locked, and then you'll pin it there. And it will be a little clunky to sew over, but it'll mean that when you open it back up, you'll have a nice point at the edge. And don't forget, you will be adding this, sewing another 1/4 inch across the bottom to add it to another square. So if it's not perfect, it's not a huge deal. And here is your finished product. This is your bottom left-hand square, and here's your top right-hand square. Now, I want to encourage you that it does not have to be perfect. You can see here, it's obviously a diamond, but up here, I had a trimming issue, and so you can see mine angle quite a bit differently. Now, keep in mind, a 1/4 inch of this, so about that much, will be hidden once we sew it all together, but it's still lovely. Once it's sewn in, no one but me will notice. So I just want to encourage you by showing you one of my mistakes, that this is a tricky type of square to make, and it is okay if it's a little bit off center.